want to stay on stage, or?
I guess.
Oops. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the session after lunch. Hopefully, we'll get some energy going in and make sure we get those cobwebs after lunch cleared out. My name is Yasser. I am the co-founder of Connecterra and the CEO. We are a Dutch company with a presence in the US, with market focus in the US as well. And it's my pleasure to be here to talk to you about unleashing your farm data. In fact, there was a good presentation this morning from D. Laval that I thought set the stage. I don't know how many of you were in there talking about AI, because we're going to be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence as well. But I wanted to sort of start with this particular quote. The more I know, the more I realize I know nothing. And this quote reminds me of some of the challenges that farmers face when you start talking about data. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, this problem with having a lot of data goes back to about 400 BC. And finally, we've solved it, I think, at least for farmers. What is the problem that I'm really trying to talk about here when it comes to farm data? To put it in context, if you had a 1,000-cow dairy farm, you'd be generating more data, text, than the complete works of Shakespeare on a daily basis. Now, arguably, that is a lot of content, and it is probably a superhuman capability if you are willing to and able to go through that amount of information every day. It's just simply not really possible. And I'm only taking, by the way, the amount of information that would come from your milking systems, your herd management systems, feed data, genetics, or activity sensors. I'm not talking of any exotic data sources at this point at all. So if we have this much data, then why is it so hard to be able to answer a very simple question, or simple questions that a farmer would want to ask, or anybody would really want to know, such as, hey, what will be my income 6 months from now? I'm a dairy farmer, and I'm trying to understand, hey, well, where am I going in 6 months? What will I make in 6 months? So let me illustrate this point by breaking down what type of data you need, or data sets you're going to need, to be able to answer this question. So you're going to need your herd management system, your feed system, contracts and market forecasts, and various other systems. From each one of them, you're going to need to know your herd demographics. Where are you today? What's your forecast looking like 6 months from now? What's your current feed cost? What type of changes are you expected to do over the next 6 months? What is my milk contract looking like right now? What are the premiums that I have? What is going to be any seasonal trends, the impact of heat stress, for instance? How many cows am I getting to tank? You need all of this to answer that one rather simple question: what's my milk income going to be over 6 months? Now, I'm going to take a slight segue, and we'll get to the point in just a little bit. Now, if I talk about the amount of data that's coming from farms, and perhaps some of you at the back can see that, I've just taken some basic systems. So herd management systems, feed systems where you manually input data. Then you've got financials, genomic data, milking systems, and I sort of call these semi-automated systems where they're generating data and they'll come into your dairy comp or your PC Dart or whatever you have. And then you have this new generation of data generators. So We've seen in the expo as well, you've got some companies that are showcasing camera systems, they are showcasing activity monitors. They're generating a lot of data. Now, my ability as a human being to be able to process this amount of information is going to go down the more systems I add on my farm. Now, arguably, these systems do great things: heat detection, health, they'll identify BCS, and so on and so forth. But my ability to process the information that's coming from all of them together, it's going to start to go down. That's just natural, the way the brain is wired. So at the top left side, when I have one or two systems, hey, I got this. I can generate a few reports. I have my Excel. I have my PowerPoints. I understand how this works. Let's add a few more systems, and you start to run into this problem, which we hear from a lot of our customers. Hey, I wish I had the ability to bring all of my systems together so I could analyze this information, because it's getting harder for me to do this. And at the very bottom, when you have all of these systems that are not really talking to each other, you sort of get into this conundrum of, well, I've just got too many systems, I don't even know where to start from. And we hear this a lot from our customers, from our users, and from the industry. Now let's talk about computers. Let's talk about machines. It's actually the inverted. It's actually it's completely flipped over. If you give computers a small amount of information, they'll probably just say, well, thank you very much. Here's a report for you. Good luck analyzing it. Your problem, not mine. But let's say you've got computers which are getting sensor data, like activity monitors. And my company, Connecterra, we used to have an activity monitor a couple of years ago. And we were able to, like many other vendors, we were able to detect heat and health issues using sensors. It was pretty amazing, actually, if you think about it. The science behind it really was that you've got a sensor that's stuck on a cow. It just moves in three-dimensional space like this. And lo and behold, I can tell you if your cow is on heat. I could even tell you that your cow has a health problem just from this motion. But the trick was that we were capturing very high granularity data. So thousands and thousands of data points per second. And computers and the algorithms were using that to detect heat and health. And that's just one example. And at the very top of this spectrum of machine capability, the more data you start to give them, now you have technologies like AI and machine learning that are not only able to detect things, because detection is something's happened and I'm able to detect it, they're also able to predict things. And this capability gets unlocked when you start to give more and more information to computers. So here is a very common sense thing that we thought of. It's like, hey, what if you put these two things together? What if we were able to use the capabilities of humans, and we're really, really good at asking questions. We're really good at hypothesis. We have gut feel, which machines do not, which is based on years and years of experience. But machines are really, really good at data aggregation. They have an unlimited amount of memory. They're consistent. They can do pattern recognition. So how can you bring AI, machine learning, computers, and the intuition and power of the human mind into one system? How can you do that? Can you do that? And if we were able to do this, essentially what would happen is that we would start to work together with machine learning, with a human-in-the-loop kind of a situation. And as we were able to get more and more data, we would be able to unlock newer capabilities. And so we have this little manifesto which says, all right, what would be the highest form of an analytical capability where you've got people, algorithms, and machines working together? We would want it to process large amounts of farm data, even if it's incorrect or incomplete, because we know that farm data has its own challenges. We want such a system to identify trends, help me find correlations. I want to be able to answer questions in natural language. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a farmer. I'm an advisor. How can I use my own language? And how can I ultimately get a truer and more deeper understanding of reality? I want to get to the truth of what is really happening, and only one version of truth. So what if we could process large amounts of farm data, ask questions, and get answers to our most pressing questions in a simple and easy-to-use product? And for that, I'd like to introduce Senior Product Manager Talaya Danzinger to the stage, who will walk us through the rest of this presentation. Thank you, Talaya.
So thank you, Yasser, for the introduction. And that was a great focus on computers and humans. And now we get to focus on cows, right? For me, this is the really exciting part, is how do we transform this into a way that we can create applied data opportunities on the farm? So first of all, if we think about what Connecterra is, our company, it's all about modern contextual analysis. And we had a great example earlier as to how many data points it requires to answer a very simple question. One that we probably, 10 years ago were happy enough getting an answer out of Excel and doing a couple numbers. But we all know that we need more precision now in the decisions that we make. Margin is harder and harder to skim from every decision we make on the farm. And so we need these integrated and connected platforms that help us make these decisions. And step one is bringing together all of this data. So to answer that earlier question, what will my milk income be over the next 6 months? We're bringing in this data from our herd management system, milking systems, feed management systems, processor data. And then two, as we think about contextual events, that's where we get a whole new set of input here. And that's this user feedback along the bottom. That ability for that human to come in and interact with the data, record events, and give our models feedback as to what actually happened. Not everything is automated data capture, right? There's still a human in the equation. And so what we're doing here with Connecterra is bringing in all of these different data points into a single platform to work our way up that pyramid of analytics. I'm sure we've all seen it, where we kind of go from data into insights and the ability to truly influence our decisions. So step one is getting all of this data in a single place. What this actually unlocks for us then is that ability to benchmark our farms against each other to understand why data changed. If we think about all of the different software technologies out there, we're at the epicenter of it here at World Dairy Expo, right? All of the different vendors that we can look at. There are a ton of herd management systems, feed management systems, processors, and all these disparate data streams. They're coming into a single farm. And the farm down the road might use an entirely different set of systems. So step one is data in one place. But what that actually unlocks then is benchmarking capabilities. The ability for a consultant to look at all of their farms in a single place on a level playing field. What does that look like in practice? Here's a first screenshot out of the platform where we're looking at multiple farms. So I'm a consultant. I've got multiple farms on my platform, and I need to understand who requires my attention right now. Not every farm has a burning fire at the same time. And so pretty easily, looking at this chart here, I can see my farm in pink along the top needs my attention related to somatic cell. So as I extract out that farm, and I look at them individually, looking just at a chart without that contextual data doesn't tell me what happened. Here's where we need that human input. And typically, we've gotten this from sitting around a farm table and holding a meeting with our herd manager, our vets, everybody that's touching the farm. But we can do more with that data when we've got that human input into the system. So here, we actually have two different points of inflection on this chart where something happened on the dairy. And we actually recorded an event here that just prior to this spike in somatic cell, we changed heat dips. So this is something that happens on a farm, right? We change suppliers, we get a new milker, we make a feed change. We're able to actually record that and not only be on the same page with each other saying this is what changed on the farm, but actually understand the correlated metrics. So we made this change. Not only did somatic cell go up, but with all of this data coming into one place, we see that we saw an increase in cows with health issues. Our temperature actually decreased. So this is probably not a THI heat stress related problem. But our milk yield per cow remained steady. What's extra exciting about this example is that each of these data sources is unique. We got our somatic cell data from our processor, our health issues from our herd management system, our temperature is going to come from a weather station, and our milk yield per cow is going to come from our parlor. It is really difficult for the human brain to take those 4 different data sets out of 4 different softwares, compile it, and make meaning. And that's where we have to employ technology. That's where we have to employ things like artificial intelligence to help us come up with these correlations and extract meaning from this data. The other piece that Yasir alluded to is that farm data is often incomplete. We know that we can run into issues with interference in the parlor. We have too many systems going on at once. We have internet outages, equipment breaks. And so we need to understand what is accurate and true in this data. And we can do that. So we actually use algorithms to identify issues in historical data. We can detect when there's an anomaly or there's missing data. And this is incredibly important so that we can draw the right conclusion. We all know about that garbage in, garbage out. Sometimes we get garbage in and we can't help that. But we can screen that then to make sure that it's not part of our decision-making process. Once we have this clean and screened data, we can actually predict the future state of that data. And so that's where we start to go into projections. What is my milk income going to be for the next 6 months? Well, with all of these data streams together, we can determine that. We can run simulations to understand, based on our feed costs and our contracted milk, what that income over feed is going to look like into the future. So good, clean data allows us to make informed decisions going forward. Next, we need to make sure that we record and track decisions and changes. So I showed that a little bit before in that overarching example where we go from benchmarking multiple herds down to a single herd's data and then understanding what happened to cause it. And there's a few different ways that we can understand events and changes. The first is that manual input. So in my previous example, we made a change. We changed T-dip in the parlor. We know exactly what that was. That's actually part of something we call the farm timeline. Most of you are probably familiar with that being a calendar that gets written on and then shoved in a drawer and maybe brought out when we are trying to answer a question as to what happened on the farm. Yes. And so we have a better way, right? We can digitize our calendar. And so that looks like the farm timeline here. We made a ration change. That can be automated depending on our system. We made an employee change. We maybe remodeled our beds in one of our freestyle barns. So we can manually track this. But that's also not enough. We also have the ability to use those algorithms and use that AI to detect when a change has occurred. And this is really where it becomes super powerful for us to be able to run that in the background, no human required, and say there was a significant change and you need to be aware of this. This could look like an alert, or it could look like an annotation on a graph. So when we're looking back at that chart and we're performing the human side of that analysis, right, trying to answer the why, we understand that there's a point of significance here. This is going to require attention. This requires further discussion. Or it's surfaced to us through a push notification. There's no need to dig through that data. What that allows us to do is quantify our results. And this is a fun example. I'll give you a second to kind of look at it on the screen, but I'll talk through it as well. This is an actual example from one of our farms that agreed for us to use it here. And it was a task that we all know is one of those routine maintenance tasks that nobody wants to do, right? We change doors on our hammer mill for our beans. We're grinding our beans on farm. It's a maintenance task that is super easy to push off to tomorrow. Maybe like changing knives in the TMR. Any of these kinds of things that in our head we know there's an ROI, but it's hard to take the time to do it. This time he recorded. I made that change. I changed the door. What does that mean for me? It means a whole heck of a lot. So on this farm, it was all good things, right? We actually saw an increase in not only milk, but energy-corrected milk per cow with a decrease in dry matter intake. We changed it to door, and now we're doing more with less. So we can quantify the impact of what we're doing on the farm. And we can choose our time range we want to do this over. We can look at those changes that we're going to see immediately. Maybe it's a 3-day window. Or we can look at those changes that require a week or two. We're making a big ration change. We have to wait for those rumens to adjust. All of that is quantifiable when we have the data aggregated and that human input telling us a change was made. In order to make meaningful decisions from this and meaningful conclusions, though, we have to centralize high volumes of data. There are those insights that are only available to us when we get lots of data in, not only for our farm, but other farms that look like us. And there's a lot of value to benchmarking. We alluded to that in the beginning. Benchmarking is helpful as a consultant to say, who needs my precious time right now? Where do I need to intervene? But it's also helpful as a farmer to say, what is possible? Where do I invest my money next? And we can do that when we get all of these different data sources in, coming in at a high frequency. So here's another kind of fun example, one of the insights that we produce within the platform. So I'll talk through this one first. We're looking at max THI and dry matter intake, but on a benchmarking basis. We all know cows hate heat, and they're going to be influenced by the hot, humid weather, but how much? And how am I doing compared to my neighbors? What this is actually doing here is looking at our dry matter intake on the farm, quantifying how much we reduced in dry matter intake, but then ranking us against farms that look like us. So on this particular farm, we had a pretty high impact. We're sitting over there in the red. Heat stress is really hurting our cows and impacting our bottom line. So if you log into the platform and you see this, you understand, it's hot and my cows are feeling it. But what if you're this farmer? We've got a farmer on the other end of the spectrum that is being really efficient and effective with their cow cooling. So over here, we've got a farmer that's really low impact. THI is fluctuating, THI is high, and I'm just fine. What's really important about this is that we're asking ourselves questions every day that are influenced by this data. Is it time to wash my fans? Nobody likes that job, right? Do I need to run my sprinkler system more? There's implications to that. I'm using more water. Do I need to adjust my temperature threshold to run my cooling system? That's going to be more energy. All of these decisions have repercussions, and we can understand what is the right decision for us based on the data coming out of the system. And finally, we need to summarize disconnected data. So we've kind of worked our way up the pyramid here, right? We looked at really basic data visualizations, interactions with that data, but we are all on a very limited amount of time per day to do these actions. What we really need is something that runs in the background and tells us what is important. And that's really where GenAI comes in and Copilot to analyze and summarize data into these custom briefing reports. Right now we're looking at about 85 different KPIs that we don't have time to pore over day after day. We could look at them, but even just looking at them doesn't tell us if it's significant. Does this require my attention right now? What we can do then is run Copilot here and allow AI and the models underlying this to let us know when it's time to pay attention. When do we need to intervene? And so here's an example of a briefing that's created that looks at all of those different KPIs and lets us know in the last week here, here's a summary of everything that was significant, key changes on the farm, with no effort from us, delivered to our inbox. What we can do then is leverage artificial intelligence to optimize our routines. So we can use those alerts and briefings to stay informed, draw more meaningful conclusions, and then deliver timely results. And this looks really familiar to us, right? We can go into any herd management software, any feed management software, and generate and look at a graph. We could get an alert here, though, that says there's a significant drop in milk production. What if we reverse the order? What if we didn't look at the graph first and try to determine if it was significant? What if it looked a little bit more like this? There's a significant drop in milk yield. It's time to go look, and it's time to understand what caused this. This we have time to do. Looking through a million dashboards, we don't. So what does that AI-enabled workflow look like? We can actually harness today's technologies to improve this workflow and make it really effortless to communicate with everybody else on our farm and understand what our data is telling us and share that with others. So we'll walk through what that journey looks like, and it's not out of reach. First off, we have our briefing. This is really cool. This is actually from a real example we found on a farm. We've just kind of anonymized it and changed it, but this is real data. Our farm briefing tells us that we had 3 major changes. Our feed cost per head went up, our production decreased, and our milk urea nitrogen increased. This is probably not great, right? This combination of things tells us there's something going on, and AI can help us figure out what that is. We've actually got a hypothesis generated here based on the interaction of this data, based on the scholarly papers that exist out there, based on what we understand about a cow, that tells us there's a recent change in that cow's diet that's led to an imbalance between protein and energy intake. This has caused an increase in feed cost per head, decrease in milk yield per cow, elevated MUN. But it's smart enough to say, you might have somebody that can help with this. There's somebody that works with your farm that's the right person. Do you want to contact your nutritionist? So pretty easy then to click a button and send a summary to our nutritionist. Yes, this is a problem. I need your help. Typically, this would be a typed out email or a phone call. But with these language models, right, introducing actual language into our problems, we can generate an email. Hi, Sarah, my nutritionist. Hope you're doing well. I'm not. I've got problems on the herd here. So here's a summary of what's going on. Can we go over this? Send. Sarah gets that and responds. Yeah, absolutely. I made a change. It looks like it's not the right one. Let's go ahead and get that adjusted in your feed management software, and we'll see what that does for the cows from here. Typically, this exchange is going to take time, right? We were going to have to look through our data ourselves, draw our conclusions, draft that email, wait for that response, and then get the change. Or we could have that data delivered to us, press a button, allow AI to do the legwork of crafting that email, that message, pulling together that data, and create this interaction with our nutritionist that allows us to solve a problem faster. So I'm going to hand it back to Yasir here to talk through how that's possible in the platform. Because like I said, this is not out of reach.
All right. There we go. Yeah, thank you. All right, so what we've shown you so far have been actual examples from the Connecterra platform, except for the workflow, which Talaya mentioned is not out of reach, and we're working on it. And what I really wanted to show you was a little bit of a sneak peek of what's happening under the hoods. Now, what you're looking at is a video where I've actually pasted in a lot of the data from a farm, and we don't need to go through the actual data itself. That's just all gibberish. But have a look at what's happening down here. You can actually see how the models and the AI engine is actually processing the information that I've given it. Now, I've done a few things that I haven't shown you before this, which is to prep the models. But this is a view of something called the chain of thought. And the reason that I wanted to share this with you is looking at how AI, or the algorithm, is thinking about the problem that I've given it. And you can see that it has actually come up with a hypothesis. It has come up with something that we call the interestingness score, where it is actually looking at the data on the farm. It is looking at, is this an interesting change? It is determining who it should speak to. And in this case, it identified that it should actually be speaking to the nutritionist. And it went ahead and even wrote an email for me. So this is pretty magical stuff that was not possible till only a few months ago, but is absolutely possible now and already part of what we're doing within the Connecterra platform today. We believe that an AI-enabled farm will have the ability to make decisions and data-driven decisions that are not possible with traditional technologies today, and we're already doing this. We will have, and we have the ability to model scenarios while saving labor time from non-productive tasks, such as writing emails. And I know we're coming up on time shortly, but if you wanted to get a summary of this conversation, there's a little URL down here where you can actually download something quite interesting. And what we did is that we trained up a model and we gave it this very presentation. The presentation right now, we gave it to a model and it turned it into a podcast. And I'll play you the first minute and a half of this podcast. It's about 9 minutes long. But I'll try and play this. I'll play this for you and see if it works.
Average dairy farm generates as much data as the complete works of Shakespeare every single day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. All that information, and somewhere in there are secrets to running things better, more productively, maybe more humane.
Right.
That's what I found so interesting about this presentation from the dairy industry. They really dig into how we can use all that data to totally revolutionize farming.
Yeah, you're right. It is really interesting. One of the things I point out is this problem a lot of farmers have with
Right? It's like too much of a good thing.
It is. It is. Think about it. You've got milking systems, sensors for everything, cow activity, what they're eating, even the weather.
It's like they're drowning in data,
Mhm.
but thirsty for insights. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. You got it. It's not enough to just have the data, right? You have
So
to-
get this, the average dairy farm generates as much data as the complete works.
Drowning in data and thirsty for insights. That particular statement and these two voices are not real people. These were generated by an algorithm. Thank you very much for your time. If you'd like to see the platform in action, please use the QR code to sign up for a 60-day free trial of the Connecterra platform. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, sorry. I'm sorry? Yep, it'll work in Canada as well. So we are supporting North America and the UK markets right now. Yep. Yes.